to be part of the UNICEF Startup Lab team. UNICEF Startup Lab was launched by UNICEF Ghana back in October of 2019 because they knew that innovation and entrepreneurship could add different dynamics to the work that they were doing to improve the lives of children. They were excited to engage with young people all throughout Ghana and to bring their expertise in creating social impact and reaching those most difficult to reach to those that were using business to make the world a better place. UNICEF Startup Lab consists of a few different elements. It has an incubation program where it works directly with entrepreneurs to train them in launching their businesses and developing a minimum viable product. But it's also excited about reaching out to the community and about giving access to UNICEF expertise and the expertise of others throughout Ghana and the world to everybody, regardless of where they happen to be. The online learning series was created to leverage this expertise and bring it online right to you wherever you happen to be sitting. Over the past few weeks, we've been able to bring experts from all different areas, and today is no exception. Today, we're talking about finance. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about how COVID has affected your own pocketbook and your business. And we're doing that with the help of an expert. Today, we're joined by Dr. Richmond Kwame Frimpong, who's the Executive Director of Financial Literacy Africa. He's going to share with us from his own perspective some unique tips and tools, information on the economy in general, and how it directly relates to you as an entrepreneur or a business person. We're so excited to have him join us here today to address this incredibly important topic. So with that, I don't want to waste any more of your time. Richmond, are you ready to join us?
I am, Emily. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here today. Now, y'all, here's what we're going to do. Just like every week, I'm going to pass this over to Richmond so he can tell you a little bit more about finance, about the economy, about how all of this works and why it's relevant to you. And then at the end, we're going to do a live Q&A. So if you're following along on Facebook, please post your questions in the chat below, because at the end, Richmond will be answering them live. So this is an opportunity to get free expertise and advice for you, for your business, or to answer questions in general. All right, so let's get started. Richmond, over to you, and I'll be back at the end to help ask some of your questions.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon to all our viewers globally. I want to welcome you once again to this online session called UNICEF Startup Lab. And most importantly, for those of you watching us, we've been having online learning series. And today I am privileged to take the session on finance matters. So for anybody who is working on a startup, this presentation is for you. And I would want you to take a little bit more time, get yourself positioned in such a way that you can take some notes and make sure you keep the details of some of the things I'll be sharing. I'll do my best to make sure I break down every little detail to the level that will make you appreciate finance matters even more so that you can apply it to your startup organization. My presentation is going to be talking about financial immunity. Financial immunity. Most importantly, how you can build financial stability in these difficult economic times. And one of the critical things I'll be sharing is what you must do as a startup to build and master the immunity against the COVID-19 implication on your finances as far as your business is concerned. Now, I'm doing this because for us at Financial Literacy Africa, across the 46 countries we run our products and programs from, we believe that it is important to make finance an everyday item. It's important to make finance an everyday thing for the ordinary person. So we break things down at Financial Literacy Africa. And our number one goal is to just make sure that out of every 10 working African people or startups, we can find 8 who are financially literate and will be able to apply that literacy to their business. Now, the next important thing I'll be going to will be to take 2 critical things in finance and break it down for you, the startup. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is understanding the economy, understanding the economy. So how are you as a startup able to understand the financial matters of the economy to break it down so that it makes a little bit more sense to you and you apply the wisdom of the economy to your business financially. Now, if you look at this slide, every economy in the world largely drives on two critical policies, and I'll make it very easy to understand. So for every economy, it is driven by the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. And it is the government of the day that takes responsibility for implementing this. Now, for you as a startup, you usually hear a lot about the government fiscal policy budgets, the central bank or the Federal Reserve's monetary policy rate and things like that. For every economic policy, it is divided into fiscal and monetary. Now, the fiscal side has to do with government's budgets. So how government spends either through projects or development or grants, and how government also raises revenue to develop its own projects. So that side of the government policy that will affect you, the business startup, is what we call the fiscal policy. The other side is called the monetary policy. And the monetary policy talks about pricing or things like interest rates, things like lending rates, things like the rate of interest on your investments. So we categorize it into money supply and interest rates. So for you, the startup, anything or any country you operate your business from, in this instance, if you are in Ghana, then you are affected by the fiscal policy of government and the monetary policy. The fiscal policy is controlled by the finance ministry, and then the monetary policy is controlled by the central bank. And I'm saying that anything that comes out of the fiscal policy will border on government's ability to raise revenue and government's ability to spend. And usually the government raises revenue through taxation. And so you will see that in this slide, you will see taxes. And for you, the person running a startup, when you are going through the government's fiscal policy, your interest should be what is the direction of the government on taxes and what is the direction of the government on his spending, so that you are able to channel your efforts to making a lot of business through which particular area the government will be spending money on. That is fiscal policy. And monetary policy will border on assuming you need funding from the banks, assuming you need credit support. What is the policy on those things? And you can see those also from the monetary policy that is driven by the central bank. So you see interest and money supply. Basically, these are the things you have to just appreciate as a startup running your business, say in Ghana. The next slide, I would want to introduce you to what I call the World Economic Outlook. The World Economic Outlook is just a snapshot of how the whole world is doing in terms of its economic might. And so remember, I have already spoken about government policy driving how every economy is run. And I've explained that the policy is either fiscal or monetary. So now I want to look at the fiscal side of the global outlook in terms of how COVID-19 is affecting all the GDP growth, or how every economy is supposed to grow, and how it affects you so that your finances are put in the right shape. Now, in this slide, you see that there is data on the world, data on the US, data on Europe, Middle East, emerging and developing markets, where Africa is, and then particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, data on Sub-Saharan Africa, and lastly, Latin America and the Caribbean. Two things I just want you to take note, forget about the rest. Look at the numbers for the world on the left, and look at the numbers for Sub-Saharan Africa on the right. For a startup, the picture of the world currently on financial matters globally is that before COVID, which is 2019, there was a lot of growth in terms of economic activity. So for startups, growth was hovering averagely around 2.8 globally. And then you notice that from 2019 to 2020, because of the economic downturn, growth has now been reversed almost twice what it used to be before. So on the data that talks about the world, You will see 2019 2.8 and 2020 minus 4.4. What does that mean to you, a startup? What it simply means is that economic activity has shrunk by almost more than a double. So what it means is that a lot of businesses have collapsed, or are collapsing, and there is very little cash available to support economic activity. What it also means is that governments are struggling to keep economic activity running through their spending. And so if you're a startup, the ability to access funds is going to be a little bit more difficult than before. Now, for those in Accra and Ghana and even sub-Saharan Africa, you will notice that the same effect of the world is showing on the data that has a heading Sub-Saharan Africa on this same page. And you will notice that for Sub-Saharan Africa, the growth was about 3.2, higher than the average of the world, which was 2.8. And now with COVID, the retrogression is almost a reversal to zero. So it is from a growth of 3.2 to minus 3.0. So if you're a startup, the basic understanding you must have is that economic activity, which basically has to do with demand for, so you, the startup, you produce whatever it is you are producing, either a service or a good, the demand for in terms of how people are able to request to make a purchase so that money or investments come into your organization is shrinking, and it is going to make work a little bit more difficult. Same way, money that is available as grants, money that is available as support for you is also now going to reduce in size. And that would also mean you need to position yourself well to survive. So having explained this scenario of the world, what must you do as a startup so that you build immunity against this negative 10? And that is what takes me to my next slide. The next slide is talking about, for you to build the immunity that will help you, you must activate your leverage on what I call the financial services universe. You must activate your leverage on what I call the financial services universe. Now, in any place where startups exist, there is a financial service system that supports them financially. And many times startups do not understand the financial services universe. It becomes a little bit more complex to them. And so they are unable to take advantage of the financial services system. Now look at this slide very carefully. Every financial service system globally is divided into 4, and I'll make you understand it so that you will leverage on it. Number 1 is banking. Number 2 is pensions. Number 3 is insurance. And number 4 is investments. Every financial service system that supports business growth is either banking, pensions, insurance, or investment. And all these 4 affect what I call cash rate. Cash rate is like the rate at which the central bank or the federal bank is able to lend to any other commercial bank that will need money. Therefore, the commercial bank would use the cash rate to determine the interest rate. So cash rate is so important. In Ghana, we call it policy rate. And it informs how easy, how cheap, how available, how costly credit is available to you, the startup, if you need it. And then from there, it affects economic activity, the forces of demand and supply. So when you produce whatever service or good, is there demand to make purchase so that you are able to run yourself and your business? So cash rate, interest rate, economic activity, and then ultimately inflation. Inflation being the price of goods rising steadily up over a period of time. So then that determines your production cost, among other things. So banking, pensions, insurance, investment is a critical financial tool that you must understand in the universe. And I want to explain it to you that banking must be understood this way. Number 1, it's an intermediary financial system that is able to bring those businesses or individuals who have a lot of money for deposit and manage that deposit extra cash and make it available for those who don't have a need. So the banking system becomes an intermediary system that manages the deposit of those who have excess funds, so that those who do not have can get into that same intermediary system and access those funds at a cost. And so for you, the startup, you should appreciate that to leverage on that system called banking, you must be on the side where you put in deposits, and your deposit is able to guarantee for you the credits that comes out of those who deposit. So whenever you are banking, know that you are banking so that you will be able to leverage on access to credits, and you don't just bank for banking's sake. So anytime you are banking, look at the cost of banking and look at the return of banking. The cost of banking will catch up with you when you have multiple current accounts that are transactionary and you have little or no deposit account. So as much as you can, if you want to leverage on the banking system, do well to make sure that your transactionary accounts are accounts that bring you opportunity to access credit at a cheaper rate. So you go to the bank and you open current account. And I'm saying don't make it multiple, because when you make it a lot of more than two, then it is going to attract cost to your startup. And when it attracts cost to your startup, you will be on the losing end of that system. Rather, you have one maybe current account and maybe one deposit account or savings account, so that you are able to transact in real time and give your customers the opportunity to pay to you and pay just a little transactional cost, and use a deposit account to now access credit and give the bank a reason to give you money at a lesser rate. That is how you leverage on the banking system. The next thing you have to understand is pensions, insurance, and investment. How do you, the startup, make the other three arms of the financial services universe work to your advantage? For insurance, know that insurance is simply a safeguard against risk. And so for a startup, you are likely to be exposed to life insurance or general insurance. In Ghana, there is either life, there is general. And now we have life, general, and health. One of the critical things you must leverage to your advantage is health. So if you are working in a team or you are driving your business with a team, you must take advantage of the health insurance system so that you are able to power the energies of the people you are working with at a very lower cost. So you have them in good spirit and in good health, and they are able to work for you. So you maximize the health insurance arm and you minimize as much as you can the general insurance side. Even if you do, just make sure that it doesn't cost you more than you are earning. And so insurance is just a safeguard against risk. So you don't go about just insuring almost everything at a very greater cost, particularly when you are just a startup. Rather, maximize on the health insurance side, and maybe you can do a bit of life and just a bit of general for the things you are using to run your startup, machinery and property, that so that you can protect them from the danger of maybe collapse, danger of fire, danger of theft, and things like that. So when they happen, you are covered, because insurance is a safeguard against risk. The next thing you must take advantage of is pension. In Ghana, there are three different tiers of pension. There is tier 1 pension, there is tier 2 pension, and there is tier 3 pension. For you, the startup, the moment you register for tier 1, which is SNIT for yourself and your team, then it becomes mandatory that you have to also now pay for tier 2 because it is mandatory. And so you must appreciate the pension system and let it work to your advantage. Tier 1 is the SNIT. Tier 2 is what you pay mandatorily to a private pension trustee. So the moment you have tier 1, you must by law have tier 2. And that tier 2 and tier 1 becomes, number one, a great encouragement to your staff, because they know that they have pension tier 1 and pension tier 2. And so then they get some security, some assurance for the day they will not be able to work actively. And it also helps you not to lose a lot of staff who would not want to be with you because you're a startup. When you do tier 1 and tier 2, maximum just about altogether 18% or 18.5%. And when you pay that amount, it helps you to retain your best talent. And it also helps that anytime any of those people are leaving, they know that they have some security of a sort. Now, assuming you were working somewhere before you started your organization, then do well to do what we call synchronize your pension portfolio. So if you are working in an organization before you came to the startup, your tier 1 is still running, your tier 2 is still running, but you would need to agree on what kind of trustee you would want to work with, and that is the tier 2. For the tier 2, you will choose who becomes your pension trustee. And when you do, you will do it either as joining what we call a master trust or an employer sponsor scheme. I will explain it. A master trust scheme is a tier 2 scheme where the startup company just gives the funds to the trustee that is administering or managing your pension, which is the tier 2. But when it is a master trust, it means that you put it into an existing portfolio that manages a number of other startups or other organizations. So it comes at a very lower cost. The employer sponsored scheme is such that you would rather create an in-house trustee system that will manage it. And for a startup, that system is not good for you because then it will cost you more and it will take away your core time that you will need to manage other things. And so you leverage on tier 1, you leverage on tier 2, master trust scheme so that you are off in terms of the time you can have and the guarantees you can have in getting your employees and your team, little team, to have assurance in you so you have them for good and work with them for long. The last one is the tier 3, and that one is voluntary. It must not necessarily have to come from you. It can actually come from your team members. They can set up something for themselves and run a provident fund for themselves so that it becomes a third tier. That is how you leverage on the pension system. And then lastly, most importantly, leverage on investments. Let the business you are running have a consistent account that is an investment account. So every month, whatever comes into the organization, you don't just put it in a savings regular account, you put it in an investment account so that in addition to you making money for the organization's investment account would also be working for the organization. So you build multiple streams of income that will help you. So this is how, as a startup, you activate the leverage of the financial services universe to your advantage, either with banking, either with pensions, either with insurance or investment. And when you do that, you notice that all the factors in these 4 pillars of the financial services universe will work to your advantage. The next thing I want to talk about after understanding your financial services universe is what I call efficient cash flow management. Efficient cash flow management. This is another important thing for you as a startup to manage your finances so well. What is cash flow? Cash flow is simply the blood or the lifeline of your startup. It determines the part that money flows into the organization and the part that money leaves the organization. So that is the path of your cash and how it comes into the organization and how it goes out of the organization. If you want to do well as a startup financially, in addition to understanding the financial services universe, in addition to understanding what the macroeconomic means and its implication on your business, which I've already talked about, the next critical thing you have to understand and leverage on is to manage your cash flow. And you manage your cash flow when you do all you can to reduce the amount of money that leaves the organization and increase the amount of money that gets into the organization. How do you do that? Very simple. You just have to understand the components of cash flow. The first component of cash flow is what I call revenue growth. The next component of cash flow is what I call operating margin. And then the last part of cash flow is your capital efficiency. If you want your organization to do very well, you must learn how to manage your cash flow by working on your revenue growth. Now, revenue growth is simply the quantity of goods or services you manufacture or produce or provide against the price of each of those services or those goods you are manufacturing or producing or you are rendering. At any time T, you must do well to increase the volume of the services you are producing or the goods you are producing or whatever you are producing against price. Now, this is how you do it. Revenue is price times the quantity of whatever service you produce. And so for total revenue, anytime for you to measure it, you multiply the price of that service or good by the number you are producing or you are delivering. It's either you increase the volume and reduce the price so that you can have the same revenue, or you reduce the volume, the quantity, and increase the price a little bit. But it's up to you. I would advise that at any time T, if you want your cash flow to work very well, learn to increase your volume or your quantity so that the price will become competitive enough and it will outpace existing service providers or product providers that you have met because you are a startup. So you are a startup and you don't have to compete on price, but you can compete on volume. So how do you compete on volume? You compete on volume when you work at getting customers that return to you to do business with you. And so at any time T, you work on making sure that every customer you get, you give them the service that will make them want to come to you again. When you do that, volume of goods required in terms of demand for will go up. And the moment the volumes go up, you are able to reduce price and total revenue becomes the same. So let me break it down with an example. Assuming I am a startup and I produce an IT solution, and one IT solution I sell is say 1 cedi, but I have produced just 5 of those solutions immediately for people who have requested for it or organizations that have requested for it. The total revenue for you, the startup, will be the 5 IT softwares you have produced times the price of one, which we have agreed will be 1 cedi. So your total revenue as a startup will be 5 cedis. Now, I am saying that you should work on getting customers to now bring you more business so that you can increase the number of people you are selling to from 5 to say 10. And when you do, remember the 5 times 1 cedi was total revenue 5. The moment you increase to 10, you will notice that you would now be able to reduce the price from the previous one and still get even more than the 5 you were getting. Because even if I do 10 times 0.5, you will notice that it will be more than just 5. And that is how you work on your revenue. When you do that, you will increase the amount of money that comes in, and that is the cash inflow, and you will reduce the amount of money you spend that goes out. And you can make that work for you so well by returning customers, by doing well to get your customers to bring new customers through referrals, and by doing marketing leads, or even improving on your product range. When you do that, price doesn't become a problem for you as a startup. You are able to give competitive price. The next thing is your operating margin. So revenue growth has to do with what you produce and price. Now, when we talk about operating margin, we are simply talking about how you are able to reduce your cost. And one of the critical things you can look at that can reduce your cost is the cost of goods sold. And when you are able to deal with cost of goods sold, you will notice that you will be able to reduce the cost of producing the same quantity. And that is what goes into price that shows up in revenue. And to do that, better make sure that you are talking to your suppliers. You are talking to the people who give you service. So you automate the service. So example, instead of just letting customers walk to your office or your shop all the time, you can reduce that by automating your payment system, for example, so that the cost of a bank transaction will be reduced because they can just send you a vendor deposit payment system that will reduce your cost. So then the cost of selling the good goes down and you become even more competitive and you don't spend so much. That reduces your operating margin. And then lastly, your capital efficiency, which borders on the assets, either movable or immovable, either fixed asset or assets that are variable. So for example, let's say you have a shop, it is a fixed cost to you, and you have a car, it is a fixed cost to you. If you want to make your cash flow work very well, make sure you are using capital efficiency. And what I mean by that is that don't just put up on inventory. Don't just put up on plants of the things you produce. Just make sure that if, for example, it's a shop and it's a car, particularly in this age, you don't need to add an additional shop in the name of opening a branch. You can just digitize your system and automate your system and just run one shop. So that with that just one shop, that is a fixed cost to you. You can even have multiple shops that are not physical shops, but will still give you the service you want across the country. When you do that, you maximize your capital efficiency. You reduce your operating margin cost, and you increase your revenue growth. And when you do that, you master your cash flow. And when you master your cash flow, you will see that you become profitable as a startup. So 3 things I have shared. Number 1, understand the workings of the economy. When you understand the workings of the economy in terms of fiscal policy, monetary policy, you know how to get the right pricing for your credits on the monetary policy side. And you know how to take advantage of government spending on the fiscal policy side. Number 2, we have also said that make sure you manage your cash flow so well. So you must have an efficient cash flow. It is your cash flow that will help you to know what to do. And number 3, I have talked about understanding the financial services system. And I talked about banking, pensions, insurance, investment. When you understand these 4, it helps you to do well and to be on the positive side of them. The next thing I want to talk about, and maybe I'll be rounding up, after doing all these 3, is to learn in managing your cash flow, is to learn to manage your inventory. Minimize the order in terms of the quantities of the inventory you keep. Don't just order things and put them down. Remember, the economies of the world has shrinked. And because the economies have shrunk, it means the forces of demand for your service or good will go down. And so to do very well, reduce the number of quantities you just put down in terms of the goods or services you procure. Make sure that at any time whatever inventory you want to keep, there is already demand for that you can preempt and project. It helps you. And then dispose of slow moving and obsolete stock. Dispose them off so that you do that through discounting or any other promotional strategy. So the cost of managing your inventory goes down. The next thing that will help you also, very important, is to manage your receivables. Manage your receivables. That is to say that one of the things that will hurt you as a startup is if you do not raise invoices immediately in a timely manner. You render a service to a customer and it takes you more than a day to raise an invoice for them to pay. Because the economies have shrunk and GDP has gone down, people don't have disposable income. And so the moment you render a service, you raise your invoice so that you can receive your money. So your receivables must have invoices that are raised ASAP in a timely manner. The next thing is to monitor your cash collections daily. Every day, make sure that before you leave your office, before you leave your shop, online shop or physical shop, you are monitoring the cash collections for that day. You know what has been spent, you know what has come in. And for every day, you can tell whether you are in red or you are in positive. It helps you to manage your receivables. The next thing is to engage your customers and be proactive in minimizing the risk of delivering on your goals. Then you have to manage your supply chain and financing. I've talked about that. Manage your revenue streams and then manage your costs. If you do these things, you will notice that your cash flow is on point and you will be on the winning side as a startup. The next thing I want to talk about, in addition to making sure that you manage your cash flow, is debt and operating models. Debt is eating up a number of startups. How do you get out of it? Consider invoice discounting so that the debts that you have, the debts that people owe you on, can be slashed. So if somebody is owing you $1 million or 100 cedis, it has taken the person more than 7 months. The person hasn't paid you. Would you still keep that on your book? No. Find a way to immediately get the cash today by discounting that debt so that you have money at hand that you can use to turn around yourself as a startup, and it will make sure that your cash flow is efficiently done and it works for you. And you even get funding to produce and to still be in business rather than to lock yourself out on debt. The last thing is to make your model efficient and simple. Don't complicate the way you work. Don't complicate the rate at which you work. Reduce the operation turnaround time for doing business. And when you do, the cost of doing business goes down. If you do this, I bet you, as a startup, you'll become competitive in pricing and you'll be able to beat the hard, medium, large enterprises on price. And when you beat them on price, you get more opportunity to sell more. The next thing I want to talk about after making sure that you do this very well is to understand the difference between savings and investment. You have to understand the difference between savings and investment. Very important for you. This is how I want you to understand it. Savings will only keep your money safe. Investment would rather make the monies you are collecting as a startup earn some more money for you. Now, if you look at these two tables, the one on the left is giving a sample in any currency. The one on the right was giving a sample. Just that the left one is savings, the right one is investment. Let me just pick one and then we move on. If you look at the 10 years on the left, somebody who is running a business is saying that in 10 years, I want my total revenue to be, say, 100,000, which is 100K. To be able to do that, the business must put aside 647 cedis every month in a savings account. 647 cedis every month in a savings account so that the business can raise 100,000K. The moment the business startup changes from just depositing the money in a savings account into an investment, go to the table on the right, you will see that same 10 years, same 100,000 target, but because it's an investment account, you don't need to put 647. You need to put just about half. So you put half, you save the rest, but your investment will be able to give you that money. When that happens, you don't need credit. When that happens, you don't need a loan. You are able to use your own money to fund your activities as a startup, and you are able to go on and make more competitive returns. The next thing I want to talk about, aside understanding savings and investment, is that as a startup, you must understand that you can become $1 million company if you are interested. You can become $1 million company if you are interested, but it starts with your effort. It starts with your decision to become that. It starts with your ability to get that done. So look at any currency at all. In any currency, if you want your startup to become $1 million company, $1 million cedi company, £1 million company, begin today by putting aside monthly stipends. That is in the name of the organization. And if you do that for 40 years, if you do that for 35 years, 20 years, 10 years, whatever, it will be returning you $1 million status, and the organization can become richer, just as I've expressed on this table. The next thing I want to talk about, and I'll round up after this, is to implement what I call the 12 keys to immunity. The 12 keys to immunity. I'll pick a few of them. Number one is to make sure that you count your pennies. Count your pennies. Don't just spend anyhow when the money you are spending, in your opinion, is very little. When you do that, you are leaking out on the opportunity of your company to move from being a startup to becoming a large enterprise. The next thing I want to talk about is take advantage of the macroeconomics. Every time the government talks about their budget, take a look at the budget, look at where they are spending money. And when you identify the places they are spending money, particularly in the areas where you operate, begin to move your services in that line. And the money the government is going to spend will come to you. Look at, again, how they are going to be taxing. And when you understand their tax system, you'll be able to avoid taxes. You'll be able to avoid taxes, and you make more money to push your business. And then lastly, I would say neutralize the Parkinson's law. Many startup companies, when they start making money, then their expenses go up. Expenses on the chief executive, expenses on the team lead begin to go up. So maybe before, he was just using Uber to go to his office, and he was saving a lot of money. Now he has increased his total revenue. And because he has increased his total revenue, he now has just gone to buy a car. And now he's spending on fuel, he's spending on repairs, he's spending on tear and wear, and he's even spending on so many things because he has now bought a car, and that eats away the organization's money. As a startup, the Parkinson's law is saying that anytime incomes go up, expenses will go up to match up with the increased income so that you are at zero. So as a startup, guard yourself against the Parkinson's law and make sure that even when your incomes go up, you do not avail and allow yourself into the temptation of increasing your expense unnecessarily. When you do that, you neutralize the Parkinson's law. And when you do that, you are able to become a better startup. Lastly on this, choose assets over liabilities. Anything you put your money as a startup into, that only takes money away from you, but does not bring you back money in the organization. It's a liability. So ask yourself, whatever I am spending on as a startup for this business, is it bringing me money, or it is taking money out of my pocket or out of the business account? If it is only taking money, it's a liability. If it is going to bring you money, is an asset. Spend more on assets and cut down on liability, and you'll be amazed. You move from just a startup organization with very little money to $1 million enterprise. If you're able to do this, you build immunity so that even when things become difficult for you as a startup, that you are not getting credit, you can fall on your investment, you can fall on your savings, you can fall on your own deposit, you cut down on your expenses, and you are able to build financial immunity. When these things, as I have described them, are done, then you would have mastered your art on financial matters for yourself as a startup. I am trusting that having done all these things and with guidance, you will be able to sail through. Thank you very much. And let's move to the next session.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Richmond. I think that I know I learned a lot from that session, and I'm sure all of our viewers learned a lot as well. If you are watching this session on Facebook Live, we're transitioning to the Q&A period now. Please post any questions you have in the chat below. We'll be answering them live right now over the next 10 or 15 minutes. So please, I'm gonna get started because I have my own questions, but then we'll take some from the Facebook Live feed as well. So thank you so much for that presentation. I think we covered a lot of different ideas and a lot of different topics, all which are essential for startups and for early stage entrepreneurs. And to get us going, I actually want to talk to you about something you mentioned kind of in the middle of your presentation, because it's one of the top things I hear from startups all the time. You were talking about, ways you can save money, ways you can reduce your costs. And one of the ideas you talked about is, like automating your payment system. So instead of people having to come in, they can easily pay you. It could help your cash flow. It could help you get cash more quickly. But we see a lot of hesitation because often, you're getting started, you don't have a lot of money. So you tend to look at the short term instead of the long term. You think, oh, if somebody pays me via mobile money, or somebody pays me by making a direct deposit into my account, maybe I lose 1%, or I have to pay 10 CDs. I don't want to do that. I want to keep all of my money. And so we see a lot of entrepreneurs that are hesitant to implement these systems that could save them long term because they don't want to pay a small amount up front. What do you think about that from a financial perspective?
Right. That is a very, very good question. Now, you spoke the mind of many startups, and you mentioned that the resistance to, for example, automating your payment system is because you are looking at instant gratification. You are even thinking that it will cost you, say, a CD if you did a mobile money system. But look at this. When I was showing the cash flow table, I spoke about growing your revenue. And in growing your revenue, I talked about volumes and price. Volumes and price. Now, if you lost just one CD as a charge for a mobile money transaction, and you were able to get 10 people to use that transaction to buy quickly for you, and based on doing that, you are making a price minus maybe a CD charge for 10 people because they find it very easy to do. Keep that scenario in mind and think that you don't do that. And because people will have to just travel and pay into your account or even come to your office to pay, that deters them from coming to do that business with you. And so the quantity or the volume of people or the volume of demand reduces from 10 to say 2. You will notice that you might not have been charged 1 CD on a mobile money payment system, but you just got only 2 requests that came through because of the bureaucratic nature of dealing with you. So rather, look at the volume that your automation will bring to you in terms of demand, and it will outweigh the cost of automating that system so that you get volumes times price that will still give you your total revenue. If you don't do that, you will be losing out in the long run.
Excellent. Thank you so much, because I think that, after years of working in Ghana, one of the biggest things I would say is a lot of times it's not access to money that's the biggest challenge startups face, it's cash flow. It's having money when you need it. But accessing money is the challenge as well. So I want to ask you about something else you mentioned kind of near the end, talking a little bit about loans. So one of the biggest challenges we see is that it's very difficult to get loans for your business. in Ghana. Interest rates are very high, but even if you are willing to pay those interest rates, it's hard to find a bank or a third party that's willing to do a loan. Do you have any suggestions for people who have a solid business plan, they have a strategy, but they don't know how to get that upfront capital available?
Excellent. Again, if you are listening carefully, I shared a slide about understanding the 4 pillars of the financial services system. And the critical part I spoke about is banking. And then I spoke about pensions, insurance, and investments. All these things can work to your advantage. When you have a business plan, you are likely to just think that what you need most is credit, but not necessarily. When you understand the investment pillar in the financial services universe, there are venture capitalist funds or stimulus funds that are available for startups as long as they have made provisions for recovery in terms of the monies they are going to make. So what you can do in the banking side is that learn to just not start opening an account for the startup the very day you need money. It won't work for you. Because I said that in the banking system, they look at transaction history, not necessarily how much you have in your account. But if you started the very day you started the account and you put very little amount into that account and you transact in and out of that account, it shows economic activity. And when it shows economic activity, the bank can trust you the day you will need funding to boost your business. The next thing you do also is to not just recline to the part of least resistance and think that credit is what you need. Most times, credit is not what you need, particularly credit that comes with cost. If you are living in Ghana, if you depend just on credit, you'll be crowded out because the government is borrowing on that same market. And you, the big companies are borrowing on that same market. And you, the startup, is also borrowing on that same market. That is why there is demand for credit. That is why the cost of credit is so high. So you use the other thing that will not push you into that corner where you have to take credit at so much cost. Because if you do, even if you do, between year 1 and up to about year 3, you are not likely to be able to pay. But mostly these credits ask for immediate payment the moment you take the credit. So then you'll be setting yourself up for failure. And so you don't start with credit, you start with your own investment. Your own investment, very little amounts you put aside. So if you are listening to me and you know that 5 years you want to expand your business, I have shown you how you can put your own money into an investment account in a bank instead of putting it in a savings account or a current account. So that in that 5 years, when you need to expand, the investment would have grown by itself and you have patient money yourself. You are not going for money that they will be charging you 33, 23%, but your own money through investment that helps you as a startup to grow patiently at no cost. When you do these 2 things, you can access credit cheaply, you can depend on venture capitalist grants, or you can depend on your own investment you would have built with very little amount over time so that you are not crowded out for credit.
Excellent points. Sorry, I keep glancing away. I have a baby next to me today. Work from home challenges. She's learning all about finance.
Wow.
I think that that's a really good point, and it ties together the 2 things that we just discussed, right? Because I think especially when you're talking about that transaction history within a bank account, because of the cash flow issues, we see a lot of times, you get paid in cash and you turn around and you take that same cash, you pay your employees. You take that same cash, you buy more inventory, and it never enters into a bank account.
Right.
And what that means is that when you go for a loan, when you go for investments, there's no official record of you ever making that transaction, of you ever making that money.
Right.
So I think that that's a really important point. And we have some questions also about this distinction. You've mentioned a couple of times, savings versus investment account. Somebody from the Facebook Live feed is saying, so does that mean a startup cannot secure a better credit facility with a savings account? What are the advantages or disadvantages? So tell us just a little bit more about why you suggest an investment account.
Okay, so having a savings account is great, but if a startup wants great capital, that is patient and that is not costly, I would say start an investment account as well. Why? A savings account, remember when I was talking about the macroeconomic indicators or understanding the economy, I talked about monetary policy. And under monetary policy, I talked about interest rate, inflation, monetary money supply. Inflation is what gives value to your money today. Savings account, as I speak now, the highest savings account in Ghana will pay you 5% per annum. 5% per annum. Inflation in Ghana, as I speak, is in excess of 11. So from day one, if all you have is your savings account, it is giving you 5% against a value erosion of 11. So you're already at -6, even if it was inflation, even if inflation was 11. So the moment you just stick to just savings, you will notice that in 3 months, what your 200 cedis could buy from the savings account will not be able to buy because you stuck to only savings. But if you did savings and you added investment, the least investment is treasury bill. Treasury bill for 91 days is paying about 14. So one, it preserves the value of the money because it is higher than inflation. And two, it pays you a revenue return of more than inflation and more than savings. So instead of having 5% in savings, you have 14% in say treasury bill. You preserve the value of your money above inflation. You make some returns on it. So you are winning on 3 counts as a person. And for you, the startup, when the going becomes tough, you fall on this money because it is investment. You don't get access to it easily. So you don't just spend anyhow. Because if you did it for 91 days, you can't take an ATM card and say, I need it because I feel like picking an Uber today. If it's a savings account, you just get an ATM card, walk to the bank, cash it at any time. But if it's investment, the discipline of not just spending will keep you waiting for the 3 months. And on the 3rd month, you make more in terms of value, you make more in terms of return, and you are able to pay for your bills, and you are better off than just a regular business. That is why you can have a savings account, but move up into investments.
Excellent advice. I love the long-term thinking. As someone who leads an organization myself, I'm taking this to heart. Our finance person is listening right now. I know he's listening to it too. You're making my life difficult. When we make more money, I'm going to want to spend it. And now my finance person, he's going to tell me no. Okay, we're almost out of time, but we have a couple more questions that have come in. So someone is asking, how can you identify which mutual fund is more appropriate?
Excellent. These are interesting questions. So what is a mutual fund for those watching? A mutual fund is an investment account that is like a collective account. So a number of people put their money into that account, and then there's a fund manager who is licensed and he manages it. There are 3 types of mutual funds, so understand it before you decide which one to do. There are money market mutual funds, there are balanced mutual funds, and there are equity mutual funds. Money market mutual funds are such that you can go in anytime to put in money, and you can go out of it anytime after 2 months at no cost. The medium-term ones, their exit duration is about 2 to 3 years. And then the equity mutual fund, they last for about 5 years. So before you take a decision on a mutual fund, you must ask yourself, when do I need this money back? So that you don't go and put money you will need in 3 months in a 5-year mutual fund. When you do that, when you go back in 2 months, they will take almost all your money and you'll be at a loss. So understand which mutual fund category, the duration, and when you would need that money back, so that will tell you which term mutual fund you do. Then when you have done that, understand that mutual funds are not just sold in banks. Mutual funds are sold in investment houses. So instead of just walking to a regular bank, you must walk to a regular investment house. And to know it's an investment house, it must be regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So don't just walk to any place where we have written bank in an air-conditioned environment and they are tellers and assume it's an investment house. No. If it's a bank, it's regulated by the Bank of Ghana. If it's an investment bank, it's regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And before you buy the mutual fund, make sure you call for what we call scheme particulars. Scheme particulars. Ask for it. They will not display it, but ask for it. When you ask for the scheme particulars will tell you the cost associated with that fund. It will tell you the history in terms of returns. It will tell you the number of times you can put money into that account. It will tell you the exposure to risk. It will tell you who is managing it. It will tell you the person behind it and all. so that before you take a decision on this mutual fund, you take the right decision as a startup, so you don't spare any money at a go.
Excellent. Really, really interesting to think about. And also, you know, for a lot of startups, right now they need things that are very short term because their income, their revenue is much more variable. But, you know, down the road, 5 years, 10 years, maybe even sooner, you might be making revenue to a point where you can really benefit from something that's longer term.
In
Okay.
fact, even in the short term, for a startup, even in the short term, a startup can still make more money on an account they want to run at any time by buying a short-term mutual fund. Why? If I put money in a savings account, sometimes maybe in a month I may not go for it. In 2 months I may not go for it. Instead of keeping that money for maybe a month or two in a savings account, you can put it in a short-term mutual fund and you can go for it at any time. But in a mutual fund, short-term mutual fund, it will be working whilst it is there, unlike in a savings account. So you get liquidity and you get value for money at the same time in a short-term mutual fund. So you just put money in savings, maybe just 20% of the money, 80% in your short-term mutual fund. So by the time you are going for it at any time, it would have worked also for you just the same way you are working for money, and you don't waste your money.
Okay. Oh, we're almost out of time. This always happens to me. Why? Okay, but I have a quick question for you. So we've talked about a lot of types of accounts. We have a current account. You've got your savings account. You've got your investment account. We also hear about the phrase deposit account. Is that the same as the others? Is it different? Tell me more about that.
So the fixed deposit account is an account that promises a fixed return over a fixed duration. Fixed deposit. So you deposit it over a fixed duration, maybe a year, 3 months, 6 months, so 91 days, 180, that's a duration fixed. Then it promises a fixed rate of return, 10%, 20%, 30%. Usually fixed deposits are run by commercial banks. So when you go to your bank and you have money to spare for 91 days, money to spare for 182 days, money to spare for 12 months, you ask for a fixed deposit. They won't tell you. When you ask for it, that fixed deposit will pay you more than your regular account, current account that is having so much in it that you haven't tempered with for the last 3 months. A fixed deposit is with a commercial bank, and the bank themselves run it over a fixed duration for a fixed return. And when you do that, you make a fixed return on that account.
And does a fixed deposit account help you build to receive credit better, or it doesn't matter which type of account you're using?
Yes, a fixed deposit account is part of your credit history. It helps because then you are so disciplined to keep money away. And so in addition to your current account with transaction, we can add your fixed deposit account as a guarantee, a security to offset sometimes even the cost of borrowing. Because if I have a fixed deposit with a bank and I have a transaction history and I need credit from them, they would really be in a hurry to give you. Why? Because they can use your fixed deposit as one of the guarantees, and it makes life easier for them. They'll give it to you quickly.
Excellent. Well, this has been wonderful. I'm sorry I have to stop us because we're out of time, but Richmond, I'm excited for us to collaborate together again. I think that this has been an incredible learning experience. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for coming on today and sharing your knowledge and your expertise. To everyone else who's watching, thank you for joining us once again. This was part 9 of our online learning series, which means we only have 1 session left. Next Tuesday at 2 p.m., please join us for our final expert session. It's going to be a great discussion, same time, same place. Really looking forward to talking about new topics and new ideas. We're really excited that you were able to join us today. We look forward to continuing this conversation. And Richmond, thank you again for sharing your expertise with us. On behalf of UNICEF Startup Lab, thank you. We hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.